Hi, and welcome back to Smart Recovery Series Tips and Tools for Recovery That Works. I'm glad you tuned into last week's episode, where we went over the ABCs of coping with urges. On this episode, we're going to go deep dive into another great smart recovery tool called the CBA, or Cost-Benefit Analysis. Each of us runs cost-benefit analyses in our own heads every day to help us make decisions about our lives. They're so common, and in fact so mundane, that we hardly even realize that we're doing them. For children, the ability to correctly judge short-term versus long-term gain is a central part of growing up. But as we get older, and it comes to whether or not we decide to use alcohol or drugs or do things like gambling or overeating or whatever your issue is, the ability to step back, grab a pen and paper, and do a more formal cost-benefit analysis like the one we're about to do today can make a huge difference in whether you succeed or fail at your recovery. So let's start the exercise. The CBA is comprised of 4 questions where you write down the answers on a grid. The first question asks, what are the advantages of using or doing your substance or behavior of choice? As in, what do the benefits and rewards of that behavior look like to you? Next to it are the disadvantages of using or doing, namely the risks and costs associated with that behavior. Skip to the bottom left where you'll see the list of advantages of not doing or using. And next to that, the disadvantages of not doing or using. So now let's just fill in your CBA. It works for any substance or behavior, but today let's just go with alcohol as an example. Some of the advantages of drinking alcohol could be general sense of euphoria, happiness, less social anxiety, your worries just disappear, you feel funnier, looser, hipper, trendier, smarter, sexier, and for all intents and purposes, pretty invincible. But now the disadvantages, like a massive hangover, embarrassment about the crazy things you said while you were feeling so funny and invincible, the fact that you can't remember most of the evening, or driving home drunk and endangering innocent people. Oh, and let's not forget the damage that you're doing to your liver. Take a moment to look at the answers on the top row. I mean, quite a stark contrast between advantages and disadvantages, right? Now let's move down to the advantages of not drinking alcohol. You feel more clear-headed, you show up on time for work, you save a ton of money, you get a lot of stuff done, you're more authentic with the ones you love, and you're more honest. And in the last quadrant, list the disadvantages of not drinking. Maybe your friends think you're uncool for not partying with them. You don't get that escape from reality that alcohol sometimes gives you, or a break from the problems of social anxiety or just general anxiety. Or maybe it costs you a business deal or two because you weren't able to wine and dine your customers. Okay, now that you're done filling in the CBA, take a step back and see what your answers can actually tell you. One of the biggest and most obvious takeaways from the top row is that the advantages of drinking are temporary, very short term, and in many cases, totally imaginary. Euphoria? It's totally short term. It ends when you fall asleep. Your anxiety probably comes back the second you wake up. Worries too. Were you really funnier last night, or did you just think you were funnier because you were all drunk? All those feelings of being sexier and trendier and whatever, they're all imaginary and short term. They evaporate as soon as you sober up. Now, in stark contrast, the disadvantages of drinking are quite tangible. They're not imaginary at all, and the effects are definitely longer term. The jobs that you'll lose for good, the damage to your long-term goals, strains in your personal relationships, lost friendships you'll never get back, fighting, not to mention what you're doing, sometimes irreversibly, to your long-term health. And the big balance between long-term and short-term takeaway continues on the second line, albeit in reverse. The advantages of not drinking are, again, long-term, meaningful, tangible, and beneficial. A better, longer-lasting, more lucrative career, meaningful, real, and authentic relationships built on trust instead of lies. Not to mention the fact that not only do you feel healthier, you are healthier. And the disadvantages of not drinking, what few there are again, imaginary, fleeting, and short-term. Do your friends really think you're uncool when you're sober? Or are you just imagining that? Shouldn't your friends really value you for who you are as a person, not how much you drink? And okay, you can't escape from reality. But isn't reality what life is all about? Why escape it? And yeah, wining and dining is a fortunate part of doing business sometimes, but Warren Buffett and Bill Gates don't drink to excess, and they're doing just fine. Is one business deal in the short term worth blowing that deal in the long term after you drink yourself out of a job? There's a lot to think about here. The CBA can generate some real truth-telling if you are honest in your answers. There's much to be said for looking at the costs and benefits of your behaviors in such stark, objective terms, especially right there on paper. What the CBA can also help you with is a preview of all the great things you have to look forward to by not drinking or using. Internalize those long-term benefits. Strive for them. Make them the guideposts in your road to successful recovery. And inversely, remember all the consequences that you'll suffer if you do continue drinking or using. Internalize them too. They're the red flags. Those are the warning signs that will help you avoid relapse and continually stay motivated to win. Hey, I hope these kinds of smart recovery exercises really help. If you've used them, we'd love to hear from you. Just drop us a line at tipsandtools@smartrecovery.org. And as always, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next episode of Smart Recovery's Tips and Tools for Recovery That Works.